Okay, so in this section, we're going to look at the moving hold. So the idea of the moving hold is when a character is stopped and they're in a hold pose, they don't actually stop completely. When we do our initial block-in, it's usually best to do this by getting them to stop entirely, but we want to give a little bit more life to it so they don't feel completely dead or unanimated. Now, fortunately, in this animation, we have a little bit of motion going everywhere, but if you take a look at various motions, such as here where it stops, it goes very stiff, here it's stiff, and here it's very stiff. So those are going to be some of the holds we really want to look at. We could also experiment with this one too. I feel like the motion's looking pretty good on it, but we might make some additions. So let's go ahead and start out with this first hold here. What we're going to want to do is just add some more motion to this. One thing I will do is I'll take the translate Y and I want to make this look like it's hovering a bit when it comes to a stop. So the idea with hovering is you basically have a small up and down movement. So I'm going to come to the Y translate on the body. And at the first frame, I'm just going to move this up slightly. And at the demise of my own camera, I'm going to add auto keyframe. So I'm going to turn on that auto keyframe now. Then I'm going to move it down slightly. And then I'll move it up slightly. So during this process, we get this setup here where we just have a little bit of a wub. So this way the character is moving up and down constantly while they're in this position. Now that feels a little bit too noticeable, perhaps. And we have this keyframe here where it kind of already is stopped. So I might want to use that to my advantage, maybe just adding in one little wub here where the character either moves up or down. Now it's going to move up in this pose, so what I might do is just have it move down a bit in this pose, and then here at this front pose, maybe already have it down. So as it comes into here, it's going to move up slightly and then down slightly. And you'll notice I'm starting with the root control there so we can get that set. Now, other things we can do is between this hold, we can introduce a little bit of motion to the other axes. So this holds all the way from here, this frame to this frame. All right, so we're going to go from this frame to this frame. We can do some tangent work here, either with broken tangents or otherwise, or we can even insert a keyframe. And what I like to do quite often is just hit S in the middle to insert a keyframe. And on the non-necessary axes, just kind of pull it down a little bit or push it up a little bit and make something very subtle. Now, subtle, once again, means hardly noticeable. So that way there's a bit of motion in every axis on this. Now, you don't always have to do this, but I do find that this adds a lot of life to it quickly. One challenge here is Z. I may not do the Z axes, or if I do, I may try and make it very subtle. I'm going to frame up on this and just make it a very small amount. But you'll see now between this frame and this frame how much motion we're getting. So that's going to be frame 88. And the next frame is going to be frame 100. Now this is a 12-second interval, so you don't want a whole lot, but you'll see how much we're getting there. Now I need to tone this back on Y. I went a little bit too crazy on Y, and some of the times the only way you can see this is by hitting that F key to really see here how much of a change you're getting. I might even delete that one there, so that way I just have a little bit of a change. That's a lot though. All things considered, I might want to use that second frame to ease it up even more. And it might be a matter of actually transitioning this keyframe down a bit. I may have also deleted a essential keyframe without realizing it, because this is jumping a lot. Let's go ahead and actually delete that one from far away and consider tangents here, how I can make these tangents just be my moving hold for that. We also have the translate X, which I may have gone a little bit too crazy on. You'll see you really don't need a whole lot of motion here to make it stand out that this character is moving. And then we can check the translate Z again, but I think translate Y ultimately is going to be where I need to find a balance. And it might be a factor of taking this front one or even this back one here, doing a copy again and doing a paste, so that way I know it's flat. And we can check if y is really the offender by just making these a flat tangent. We can use this one here, which is flat tangent. That will remove the y, and we can get a better look at that. And I'd say, yeah, y was probably one of the bigger offenders here. I'll just take this tangent and make it slightly that way. And we can see now the slight movement we're getting. I don't really like the translate z. I might even get rid of the translate z and just do x and y. I think that looks a bit better. Now, I do like to introduce slight rotates as well, so we can just kind of nudge these slightly here. And it doesn't matter if you're going in the same direction or not each time. Usually variety is your best bet here. So once we get this here, we can get a bit of motion, and you can see the rocking back and forth that has. Now, we could check the effect this has on this section, whether or not this is too much or not. It's hard to say in just the context of that clip. I'd say that's okay. I don't like how much the hands are tilting down in this particular pose, so we might want to find the culprit there. 88's where that started. So 88 to 100. And those hands really have a lot of tilt to them. It's going to be one of the rotates causing that. So I'll just hit the F on this. And really want to get these close to being the same as probably this rotate Y partly. And I'm once again highlighting these and hitting F. That way we can really see this, and we can just add a very small amount of motion to it. So let's go back to translate Y. I think translate Y is still kind of a big offender here. I could insert a keyframe here for that again. Flat the tangents just to see if Y is really a big offender. And for some reason, we don't see that too much because the inserted keyframe wasn't a copy. I'd have to take these and flatten them first, and then insert a keyframe. And then we can set these back to auto. And we could just move that slightly. And I'd rather have a keyframe controlling it than not. That's looking okay. I might consider a little on translate Z. And then once again, moving back to the rotates, just seeing if one of these is a little bit too strong. And I think it is actually this X. And that gives us something a little bit more subtle, like this thing's still alive. So you can see it's actually looping, which is kind of cool, and we can get a feel for how that's looking. But I feel like that gives it a bit more life through there. So now when we get to that particular pose, it doesn't look like our character has died. It looks like they stop, and they're doing a little bit of a hover here, and we have a bit more motion. Now, one thing I will say is through this entirety, we also have a little bit of an issue with that where it feels stiff, and we can actually remedy that as well by coming into the body here. And between these frames here, which is basically 1 and 88, adjusting some of those keyframes to give this a bit of motion. So if we come in here, we could look at various things like the translates. Translate X, you'll see it doesn't really have anything going on between 1 and 88. We do have these slight keyframes here, but we could add some subtle movement. Now, this can be accomplished a couple different ways. We could actually just give this a little bit of a tweak here on an animation handle. And what this will do is it will take that first frame and it will give it a slight offset so it's not perfect through here. And I might take this over to the next frame where the character is pausing to frame 100 and just kind of treat these as an internal sequence. This will give us a bit of translate X information. I could even delete the first frame where it stops at, now that I think about it. And that would give us a bit more translate X side to side. You're not really going to notice this initially, but it will make a difference. That's the really weird thing. We actually do have a lot of Y information between here and there, so I don't think that's an issue. We could introduce more potentially, but I think this actually works out okay in terms of getting the feeling of this having some motion to it and then stopping. It doesn't feel unorganic. Translate Z, that's a linear motion, nothing we can do there. Rotation, we can make some changes here. We could give it a big rotation, which you'll see makes a big difference. Or we could just come in here and give it a slight little tweak so that there is a little bit of motion there. I'll do the same with rotate Y. Notice I've moved to the center. That way I can notice what this rotation looks like. And I'll do this on each of these. So this way there's just a little bit of motion as this is moving on all these axes. And you can see now it feels a little bit more alive there just in terms of the body, in terms of the moving hold. So that's going to give us this first chunk between 1 to 88 for the body. We don't have to do it on just the body. We can actually do it on each of the controls, and we can add a lot of life to it. And this is where animation starts to take a lot of time, but it makes a big difference. So, for example, if I take a look at the rotate X's, they're actually a hold all the way from here to here. I could vary this by deleting everything and then just on this keyframe, giving it a slight nudge. So this way there's constant motion on that shoulder all the way through, and it just gives a little bit motion in the stop. I'll come to the next frame here and do something similar. Rotate Y, I can just delete these out. And then on this frame, just give it a very slight nudge in a direction that looks good. That's downward. I might want it to be moving slightly upward by the end here. And now this will have a constant upward movement. And then when it gets here, it will go slightly down. I could also go the opposite direction, where here we go slightly up or slightly down instead. And I think that might actually look better. I do have to be careful that it's not blaringly visible. You can see there how that arm's starting to look less stiff. Then we can get to the rotate Z's here, do the same thing, just delete this. And once again, on this keyframe here, which is the start of our hold, maybe give it a slight swing out so it swings in. And now it looks like the arm's kind of dangling there instead. I may also want to move this earlier. This is an interesting factor with these as well. There's nothing that says we can't take all the rotates on this elbow and put them in the middle. So now it will have a stronger swing in the midsection. And then as it gets to here, it will be very subtle and just feel very natural. And that's going to give us this ability to have this much more organic feeling arm. And you can see how this side's already feeling much less stiff compared to the other side. Let's do the elbow before we do the wrist. I can do the same deal here where I delete each of these. And I'll actually move this out to 52, which will get us there faster. Maybe not, though. I'm going to move it back so we have the subtlety of the initial transition. But I'll treat it the same way. We could just hit the F key here, and we can explore moving these. So once again, I have the elbow selected here. And I'm actually not seeing a difference here, which is interesting. And I accidentally messed up my camera again there. Nice thing is, since the camera has that keyframe, we can go to my shot camera and delete that. It's unfortunate we can't lock these with a reference, but what do you do? Okay, so that's a very subtle movement, and it looks like it's finally working, which is good. So I'm just going to nudge that down, and it really doesn't matter where it goes. I'll do the same thing here, just kind of continue Y in the direction that it has been going, and Z, maybe move that up slightly. And you'll see here, we're going to get a bit of a movement with it out there. When it stops, this is going to be too strong. But if I go ahead and move these all out to 52, like I did with the other one, with the moving hold, since we just have this really long glide here, we'll have a nice subtle movement to the wrist, and it won't feel like it's dying on us. It will feel like it is just moving slightly. Now, we might also want to give this a little bit more space here. I'll go to 120 so you can see how this looks transitioning into the next pose. And you can see now, short of the fingers, everything looks like it's alive. That's exactly what we're aiming for. So, as you might have guessed, we'll work our way to the fingers. We'll come in here to the first phalange. We can grab this, and what I'm going to do with this is make it so these are either opening more or closing more. If we look at the next pose, they're going to kind of come here and swoop up. It might make more sense if they're sort of closing, and then when they get here, they'll start opening. And I'll do these simultaneously, the top finger and the bottom finger, since I know that this is what I'm going to want for these. With this one, I'm going to be a little bit less subtle. Because the hands are one of those areas of communication, and we move them with intent. So it could add to our searching feel, if that makes sense. So I'm going to come back here to 52, and I'm going to drag out that keyframe there. So now this arm should feel alive from shoulder to elbow to fingers, and we're going to break up that stiffness. So you can see that one arm is less stiff, the body's less stiff. We're getting a nice look to that. The other arm is still very stiff, and hopefully that gives you some contrast. So, as a challenge, what I want you to do is try to add a moving hold to this arm. And as a bonus, try doing the other arm. Go ahead and pause and give that a shot. And when you come back, we'll go ahead and do the other arm and then explore our next moving hold pose. All right, so let's go ahead and tackle the other arm now. The other arm shouldn't need as much work, and we can kind of copy the formula that already worked for us. So I'm going to save because we've made good progress, and you should too if you made those adjustments. And we can just hop over to this arm and formulaically do our adjustments. So I'm going to do this one a bit different. I see where it stops. I'm going to delete everything before that. And then I can just come through and quickly make these adjustments so that we have a subtle movement there. We have a subtle movement here. We have a subtle movement in this direction maybe. So it's all aiding in the correct direction. I'll come out to about 52 with what I did beforehand and just move it. And then we can hit play and see how that looks for that arm. Make sure it's not too dramatic. You'll see I'm going much faster now. That's because I already did it and I'm confident in what needs to happen. Now, I don't quite like how these are swaying in the same direction here, though. So I need to find what controls the sway there. Looks like X might be the best bet, or maybe Z here. And we can make this maybe sway back this way more. I don't want it to be a big change, though. It's kind of turning into one. Yeah, I'm not opposed to them swaying in the same direction. Let's move our way down. We'll go to the elbow here, and we'll just go ahead and take these, lob off those front keyframes that have been problematic. We'll tweak these ones slightly. So rotate Y. We'll just move U a bit, maybe upwards, rotate X. I'll move this down, rotate Z. I'll move this down. And I'm just looking for how it naturally kind of flows. I actually might move this up rather than following the grain, so to speak, of the curve. Let's try going against it and see what happens. And let me move that back over. A lot of this is just experiment early on when you first start animating. Don't let all my technical stuff get in the way of you making beautiful things. I'm just showing you a way that you can kind of breathe life into these stiff poses. And it's one of those things you want to do towards the end, because doing it towards the beginning is not fun. There is a lot of consequences to that, and you really want to only do this once you've locked in your timing and have a good sense of your key poses. So just be mindful of that. Let's see, we'll move that up slightly. Move this up slightly. All right, cool. So coming here to 52, we can move those over. And now we have the shoulder, wrist, and elbow done. You can see how we're getting more life there. And now this character is very much not stiff anymore. The last thing is, once again, our fingers. So let's go to our finger controls, and we can do the exact same thing here. Now, I'm going to do these all together as far as the deleting goes. So we'll just grab all of these and delete all of these. This one I'll go ahead and close in, maybe. I think that could be a fun difference there. I do have to be mindful that they don't touch necessarily. And then from here, I can just offset these again, back out here to somewhere around 52. And I'm just using 52 to keep these in the same keyframe area, if you're wondering. That way I don't have a bunch of in-between frames. We could offset them more, and we actually will do that in the future, but this will give us a base sort of setup here to breathe some life into that pose. And now you'll see that we're just getting a lot of subtle motions where the character's entire body is moving and not just their head. So that will get the first moving hold done. And if that seemed like a lot of work, you're absolutely correct. Welcome to animation. Keyframe animation takes a lot of time. So let's go ahead and explore for the next area we have a hold at, and I can already tell this is a big area here, but the fingers aren't really a good read on where holds are, so much as is the entire body. So we stop there, and then we grab, and there is our next hold. So here to here. That is going to be an area where we have a hold. So let's go investigate that. That's going to be frame 132. I'll set that as my front range. All the way out to this frame here. This frame is where we start to move, but this frame here, 156. So from 132 to 156, our character's essentially doing nothing but looking at this. So we'll start it out the same way we did previously, but we have a more subtle range to work with here, meaning that we don't have the ability to delete things and drag them way out. So we can start at the end frame. This is usually a good way to go. And let's say I wanted this to sink down as it's holding this. I could just give a slight shift in Y. And now you'll see as it's holding this, it will just slightly sink, which is great because it anticipates it to throw. I could also interpret this line a little bit differently. I would want this to kind of angle outward. And as a matter of fact, rather than moving this down, let's do something different. I'm going to undo. Let's just use the animation tangents here. So this way it dips, but we don't actually change the position. So it's actually going to dip down, but it's going to come back up. And now you can see I have a really nice hovering effect. And we can actually do that with pretty much all of these. For translate X, if we want to make it sway, we could angle this one up and we could angle that one up. Notice I'm going in the same direction. We could also angle this down and create an S curve, and we could have it move in a circle, which could be kind of nice. We could do the same with the translate Y, but I think translate Y is better with that sinking feeling. We could do the same with the rotate here. We might, ooh, that's the translate. Okay, yeah, we can do the same thing with the translate Z here. We just have to be careful, maybe a little bit more subtle with this one, but we could give it a slight S curve so it rocks back and forth. That's pretty strong. It's hard to see these. If I hit F on them, you'll see it much more clearly. And that's just highlighting them and hitting the F key. And after you make an adjustment, you generally have to do that again. So just be aware, highlight and hit F, and you'll see that we're starting to get that a bit closer. And the idea is to just break this up a little bit so the line that it would normally be creating a flat line on isn't flat. And that gives us this effect of almost breathing. So let's go back to the translate X and check that with the F. And that looks okay between those. Translate Y with the F. That's pretty dramatic, but I'm not opposed to it. All right. So a bit of motion. I think the translate Z might still be too strong there. You don't have to do it on every axis as well. You might just want to do it on one. Also, you might want to do it in a singular direction instead of two. I'm okay with that, though. I don't hate it. I might make it even more subtle, though. Even more subtle. So we just have a little bit of a jitter. And, of course, we haven't even gotten to the rotates. So with rotates, we can do something similar. I'll just frame up on this and just slightly above. And you could consider playing around with the S curve if you want. That'll make it have a lot of motion, a lot of jitter. You can do the same with the rotate Ys. Slight S. Good amount of jitter. And then rotate Zs. So slight S down, slight S up. And there we go. That gives us the body movement. Now, as you might have guessed, we're going to move our way to the shoulder here, and we'll just do the same thing. So we'll come to the rotate X's. We can just give a slight S, so this way the arm is moving. That one's pretty subtle, but I'm okay with it. Rotate Y, same deal. We have to be careful with this lead arm. With this one, I might actually just have it lift up instead of doing an S. So on the motion, I might do something like an S, but here I might consider otherwise. I could explore the S setup, though, where it does transition one way than the other. I think that does give a little bit better flow to it. Rotate Z. And there we go. We're starting to have a bit more life in there. For those of you who play video games, you might notice this looks a lot like an idle animation. When I'm creating idle animations for games, this is actually what I do. I copy the same keyframe front and back, and then I just tweak the curves between them so they have like a slight curve transition between. Works pretty well. I'm going to do the same for the elbow here. I might do another S for this, and I want to view this in the animation. That looks a little bit too strong. Now that I'm looking at it, I think the elbow was the offender there. A little bit. The shoulder's still kind of the offender, but I don't know. I'm okay with it. We'll just go ahead and get that in there. Just have a bit of motion. Come to the rotate Y. Do the same thing. It's going to give us a forward-backwards movement, so I have to be careful here that it's not too strong. And rotate Z, same deal. It'd be nice if the rotate Z kind of aligned with the eyes a little bit. So you can see over here, it's kind of looking that way. If I move it that way, and then if I move it this way with an S curve, we can kind of make it look like they're analyzing it. We could also synchronize the eyes to read that a little bit better. This is pretty offset from that, so we might find it better not to, but that'll work that area a little bit more for the elbow. And I could consider coming back up to the shoulder, finding which axis here maybe is a bit too strong in the regard of rocking that wrist, and try and fix that. I'm not sure which one it would be. It could also be a body one that is causing the issues, which is kind of wild to think about. But I think it actually might be this axis here, where I'm just getting a little bit too much there. But let's keep going. Let's work our way to the wrist. And the wrist is the last one we're going to need to do here because the fingers are locked in position. So if you're holding something, your fingers aren't going to shift. So be mindful of that. You don't need to tweak everything. That will give a bit more to the wrist. On rotate Y, come in here to rotate X. So give a little bit more to rotate X. And then finally rotate Z. This will give a little bit of motion to rotate Z. And we can hit play. And there we go. We're getting that motion there, so we're getting a bit more. Now remember, we're not seeing this in context. We're not seeing this in the context of the entire animation, what comes before or after. It's useful to check just to make sure we haven't overdone it. So let's go ahead and hit play and see if we've worked the stiffness out of that arm and out of that torso. And then we'll get that final arm in there. And I think that actually looks pretty good. You can see the contrast now from one pose to the next. So you can see the fluidity this has, and then the stiffness that has. So we really want to fix that final one up. So let's go ahead and explore the other arm. It's not as seen here, so it's not a big problem, but it's still a problem. And make sure you save. You don't want to lose all this work. I know it's not really the biggest deal, these very small movements, but you'll be surprised how hard it is to get it to look the same again. This adds a lot of uniqueness to your animation that is very hard to recapture the same way if you like the way it looks. But since I am just kind of S-curving this, I guess it wouldn't be too hard to copy this formula. Now, for this one, let's just stick to the formula we've been doing. We'll do a little bit of an S-curve here. This way we just get a little bit of a motion, and we can do the same to the other one. And just copy that over for the shoulder. This one isn't as important from the sheer fact that it's not really on screen too much. You can see it does give a little bit of motion there. You can see the elbow coming back around the side, which is nice, but not the biggest deal. Now let's come to the elbow. Do the same thing. I'll just go ahead and give it a slight S curve. I like how that's twisting the arm a little bit there. We can hit play. See, it opens up the wrist a little bit on that rotate X. Rotate Y. Slight little S. And I do want to reiterate here, don't feel you need to do the S's here. All right, I'm going to hit rotate Z there. You could try something else if it looks good in your animation. Okay, now moving to the wrist, we can do the same thing. Just come in here. I'm going to continue this down slightly, continue this up slightly. And that actually was too intense. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that adds a little bit too much energy to that. So you kind of want to just think of it as breathing. And I probably repeated myself a dozen times now. Welcome to animating. It's very time consuming. But I want you to see the process here. You know, I don't want to speed through it. I'm just going through and S-curving each of these to save some time though, now that you kind of know what I'm up to. Okay. Fingers, last thing to deal with. So same deal as last time. These fingers need to move. And with these ones, I might actually opt to just open and close. So rather than having an S curve, I'll do a slight finger up, slight finger down with these ones rather than having them transition. That way they act with more intent than something like the body. The body, it's just going to be a little bit jittery. It's going to be, you know, the side effect of the engine in this case, but you can think of it the same way for a human. It would be the human engine that you're seeing, the breathing, and whatever else our body's doing when we're not telling it to do things. It's actually freaky when you think about how little you tell your body to do and how much it actually does. And there we go. So that breaks up that pose and makes it less stiff. So let's save and just give that a look. I know it's not going to make a big impact, that arm, but you always want to check. Make sure you don't screw anything up down the line earlier or later, and just make sure that your contributions are good. And I would say that is looking much better. So we're getting some really nice breakup to those poses. The character's starting to feel really alive. Now we need to break this final stiff pose, which is the throw pose where the character's thrown over the shoulder. So that's going to be between frames 172 and let me start that 172, 220, 172, and it's going to hold till 180. Okay, so that one's not too bad. Now this one is different than the other one. So with the other ones, we were moving and pausing, if that makes sense. We weren't following a motion. So this is where we can get some of that idea of follow through in, if that makes sense, or what I like to call overshoot and settle. So what that means is this is actually going to move with some intent, this arm at least in this body. So what we're going to do is look at the animation curves and we're going to continue them in the direction of the motion. So in short, with something like the torso here, I'm going to want to continue moving this backwards in the direction that we were going. And it looks like I actually copied one of the controls here at a point. I'm going to leave that in here because I don't know if deleting it's going to hurt anything. But I'm going to want to continue that back in that direction, if that makes sense, for this moving hold. So I'm going to take that rotate and X and get that in there. So I already know that's the direction that hold's going in. So you can see the rotate X just continues in the direction of that motion a bit. And that's going to give me this idea of overshoot. Now, with the other ones like translates, I have sort of free reign here. I could give this a little bit of a nudge. I could give it an S curve if I want. And I think I might go with the S curve for the translates. That way I just get a little bit of shifting. And there is going to be a lot more motion in this hold than there has been in the past. With this one, I might have it come up and then go down with the S curve. So that way we get a little bit of a jitter. With the translate Z, I'm going to want it to go backwards a little bit, just a little bit, and then forward a little bit. And that's going to give me that idea of overshoot and settle. Now that's too strong, so I'm going to highlight these and hit F. Woo, that was intense. I might also want to go back to the other translates and just check this. Because, yeah, we want to keep that a little bit more subtle there. But we still want to get that idea of it moving backwards. So let's just check the translate intensity here for X. That's fine. Y, that's fine. All right. And the rotate X, we've already kind of handled. Rotate Y, we could add a little bit to, just add a little bit of twist to the body. I'll follow the arm that way and then move it back this way. So that way there's a little bit of a twist. And I could maybe push this one a little bit more if I wanted to, opposed to what we were going for. Notice it is adjusting the frame ahead of me. So I might want to check that real quick. I might set this to something like 160. And I think that's okay. It gives us a better idea of like an arc there. But you want to be careful if you're noticing that front one move a lot. And a trick is you can kind of follow the direction it was previously curving if you want to have something a bit more subtle. Okay, so that is pretty strong. Let's just check it real quick. I'm going to pipe in our numbers, and this will give us our initial moving hold for that throw. And the reason I'm checking it is because it's not that subtle. But you can see it gives us that kind of unbalanced feel where the character sinks and it has some energy to it. And I think that's actually really nice, all things considered. I might want to make the twist a bit smoother there, though. It does kind of jar one way and then really kind of move back. So I might want to move from doing an S-curve on some of these to not doing an S-curve, meaning here we just continue this down so that the rotation goes with Y. And then I might think of rotate Z the same way. We'll just curve it one way and rotate X. I already have rotate X in place, so I don't really feel much of a need to change that, but I'll give it a bit of a nudge. And then when it comes to these translates, I might do the same thing where I just nudge them in a particular direction rather than doing an S, just having it kind of sink and lose its weight there. And maybe for translate X, we'll keep it there for some variety. But by making those go in the same direction, it'll give a moving hold, but it won't give a bounce to it. And I think that feels a little bit better there. So let's work our way into the arms now. That's once again going to be 172 to 188, I believe. Or 180. We'll probably have to break up the next one too. But now that we have that set, let's move into the arms. So once again, the arms are going to kind of convey intent. We're going to look for the direction that this was thrown in and continue that way and Y. So our rotate Y here is going to, actually was that, no, that wasn't our rotate Y, it was our rotate Z. Our rotate Z is going to continue in that direction. And then when it comes to rotate Y, we can probably play around with that too. Just kind of curve this out and rotate X. Looks like it's already curved for some reason. So that works. Rotate Z, yeah, rotate Z, rotate X. They must have been the same axes there. And that's going to make it so the arm just kind of continues back with the body there. Then we can move up to the elbow and do the same thing. We can just nudge the Z back a little bit and come into the rotate X, adjust the curve to just kind of continue. I don't really want to change the value, so we'll just have that curve follow it. Rotate Y, looks like it grabbed it when I moved that control, and rotate Z. Let me see what this looks like between. Okay, rotate Z, I don't care about too much, but that should give a little bit to the elbow there. So it continues, and then we can move into the wrist. And the wrist, the same thing here, where I just take this final key and I maybe rotate it back that way a bit. Then we can check the various rotates, see which ones need a little bit more life in them. Rotate X got some, rotate Y got some, and rotate Z did too. So all of them have a little bit more life. And then we can get into the fingers. Now the fingers, I would actually like to bend those back a little bit more if I could, but really we only have access to Z. And we have to think about how this is going to go if we're going to throw. So if I throw something, my hand's going to kind of cup and curl. This kind of launched with two fingers. I would imagine my fingers would come back together at this stage, if I had to guess. So what I'll do here is just look for this and find the transition that I like to ease this into the next pose. And it looks like our fingers do close in the next pose. So I just might give this a little bit of encouragement in that direction. You'll notice I'm going a bit more intense with this than I did with the other axes. I think we have the freedom to do that with the fingers opposed to the arms because they don't affect things too much in terms of their shape, and they're small, so to be seen, they need a bit more dramatic effect. So something like that gives us a bit more motion in that arm. Once again, not that noticeable, but it's there. It's one of those things that we did it, we know we did it, so that's all that matters at the end of the day. So let's move into the final shoulder here and just give it the same sort of treatment. In this particular one, I'm just going to angle the curves to fill in the gap here. So I'm just going to angle this up, angle that up, so we just get a little bit of a subtle jitter there. Now, I want to be careful here, though, that the arm doesn't go into the ground. So I want to make sure that when I rotate these, we're not getting any sort of ground penetration because it's very close there to the ground. So just be mindful of that. But I do want to kind of just continue this in the direction and just give it a very subtle motion. That way that arm's not going stiff and we get a nice result. All right, so let's go 1 to 222, and this is going to break up our major holds that we had. And once again, this is adding in something called a moving hold. So if we go ahead and hit play now, you'll see the robot looks nice and loose, no longer stiff in this pose. In this pose, after the throw, and then after that, we get a very stiff pose, and then we move forward. So what we need to do here is look at this final pose here, which is a hold between here and here, and get that to look less stiff is going to be our goal. So that's going to be between 192 here, I think, and 196. So this is a 4-frame hold, but it's going to make a big difference. So let's get that going here. 192 and 196. And this one, we're actually going to do it similar to the last one we just did. We're at 192. We're going to continue the overshoot and settle effect, which is essentially the character just finished that throw. Let me come to 188 to show you. They just finished this throw, and they're coming back into this pose. We're going to overshoot this, is the idea, at this 192 range. So what that means is for the torso, we're going to just rotate this slightly. So it's forward a bit. For the arms, we're going to rotate these slightly down, elbows slightly down. And we'll do the same on this side. Arm slightly down, elbow maybe dramatically down for that arm, since it's further away. We could give a slight rotation to the wrist down, slight rotation to the wrist down. And if we hit play now, you'll see a big difference here where we've lost that stiffness entirely. And it's going to smoothly transition. But I still want to go through the motion of adding just that little bit of jitter so we get what we're looking for. So when it comes to things like the translates, for example, let's not ignore these. Let's play around with them. I'm just going to knock them down a little bit in intensity so that they start to follow the natural curve that they're going to go with. This one actually already has a little bit here. I might just S-curve that so we get a little bit of a sync. This one here, the Z is pretty consistent, so I might just give that a slight nudge in a singular direction, maybe scooting backwards just a smidge and settling in afterwards. I'm going to frame up on this one, though, because I feel like that's a bit too intense. And you'll see it has a very dramatic tail end there, so I want to make sure that looks okay. On the rotate X's, we already have these going good. Rotate Y's, we might make a slight adjustment here where I just move this maybe up even. So it has an area to correct to, and same with rotate Z. I can move that up or down, and now we'll get a lot more rocking there. Remember, this is moving with intent, so it is going to be more dramatic than what we saw before. Shoulders, we'll take a look at the rotates. I just added a bunch, but we could still add some. So we could continue this down here just a little bit. So that way it has that follow through action. That's good there. Rotate X, we could continue down over here just a smidge. So that way we have that transition, come to the elbow and do the same. I'm going to look for where it was going originally, and it looks like that's good. Rotate Y, looks good. Rotate Z, looks fine. Wrist, we can do the same thing. Rotate X, analyze that. Just have it coming back from where it was at. Rotate Y is good. Rotate Z is good. Okay, so that gets the arms. I'm not going to get to the fingers quite yet on that. I'm going to do the other arm just to stick to the formula. We can come in here, rotate X. I'll continue that out from the direction it was coming in, just a small amount. Rotate Y is fine. Rotate Z, continue it from the direction. Come into rotate X on the elbow here. Rotate X is fine. Rotate Y is fine. Rotate Z is fine. So the elbow is one of the big ones that we changed. Wrist, that one's fine, that one's fine, and that one's fine. Okay, so now we get into something like the fingers, and we could just do the same thing with the fingers where we continue these out from where they were going. That way they just have a slight bit of motion to them and aren't too jarring. And just have a natural fall off. So we have more life in here. All right. Not that you necessarily need life to a robot, but you do want to think about how things move. And in general, if something's going to move, even if it's mechanical, it's prone to these overshoots and settles, simply because it is existing in a world of gravity. Now, I could also play around with the head on this one. This is kind of an interesting one. The head goes stiff, and we haven't added any sort of holds to the head. We could continue the head from this direction, so this way it's moving slightly, which might be a nice addition. And we can hit play here, and you can see all that motion we're getting. Looks like he's hyped up on sugar. All right, so let's set this back to 1, set this to 220, and we're almost done with the moving holds. So now we see a lot of life here, looking good. Grabs, lifts, looks, throws, and goes. Now the last thing is on the go there. We might want to add a bit more life, as you might have already guessed. So what we'll do is just take the very last frame and give that a little bit of jitter, so as that's moving, it doesn't have this same stiffness, and then we'll be good. And we'll have a really nice looking life-like robot on our hands. So let's go ahead and explore that last frame here, and iteratively just go through and make these adjustments like we have been doing. I might come into the midsection here when it's still on screen and track how these changes look from here. But I'll basically take the Z, move it down, or translate X, move it down. All those are good. Take the rotate, move it down, rotates, maybe move that one up. And I'm just arbitrarily grabbing a direction here. So now if we take a look at this last section between, let's do 192 and 220. So that way we have our last little jitter. We can just treat these as one and the same. We'll have that feeling of this character kind of jittering here. Now this also has a little bit of an issue here where you'll see this nicks the ground. This is a good opportunity here to just come in with my translate Ys, and I could push that up a little bit there. So that way we have this little dip, and then it ups over the hill. And obviously I can make that one more dramatic if I need to. That way it feels like it's purposely going over the hill, which is fun. Okay, so we already have our rotates, and that was for the body. I don't think we really need to change the head too much, so we'll move into the next area, which is going to be a shoulder. And same deal here, we'll just play around with the rotates, so we get a little bit of rotation here, a little bit of rotation here, a little bit of rotation there. And I'm checking a frame it's on screen for, so we can actually see if it's too much or too little. But with how quick this moves across the screen, I think we don't need to really worry about intensity too much unless we're doing something super dramatic. Let's go ahead and just give a little twist to the elbow there. Here I have to be careful with the bend, because if I bend it down that way, it might clip through the ground. So Well, at the same time, it goes up by the face, so I'll just go there with it, and we'll have to double check that. But that looks fine for the elbow. Let's come into the wrist, give the wrist a little bit of rotation here. And once again, not really caring too much about the direction I go in. Sometimes I'll lift up, sometimes I lift down. I could animate with a bit more intent than I am doing, but that'll take time. If I was getting paid, a salary for it, sure. If I got an 8-hour workday ahead of me, I'll go ahead and do that. And, if you guys are trying to create a portfolio piece, by all means, take your time with it. I'm trying to get through the demo, though. Okay. So there we go. That arm has a bit more life. And I know it seems silly at this point. You're just like, wow, you don't even notice these changes. But I guarantee you, in the long term, these changes make a massive difference in making your animations look lifelike and more realistic and more appealing. So yeah, it's worth it. This one, I'm not really talking too much about what I'm doing. I'm just autopiloting at this point. I'm just coming in here and tweaking these last little curves so we have those motions. Hopefully at this point you understand the process of what we're doing here. It's kind of rinse and repeat. So while I do this, let's just recap. Certain areas like this one, it really doesn't matter the direction you go in. You can go in whatever direction, and you're just adding a little bit of a jiggle to it. So that way it feels like it's not dead, it feels like it's live. And that's the idea of giving something like breathing to the animation, where the character looks like they're alive still. But with certain areas like the throw, you want to make sure you're doing it with intent, meaning that it's following the inertia, and that's going to capture one of those principles, which is overshoot and settle, or what we might know as follow through and overlapping action. Okay, so that's the last of the moving holds. That one's going to be perhaps the least noticeable, but useful nonetheless. And I might still want to come into the head here and maybe even consider adding just a little bit of jitter to the channels that we're not using on this hold. That way we have a little bit of something going on and maybe indicating that it moves forward afterwards. I think that looks nice. Okay, set that back to frame 1, save your progress because you've done a lot of work, and let's hit play, and we can see our animation come together in a much more polished state. So at this point, we have our curves nice and refined, and we have all our moving holds broken up. So we're starting to get what is the final look of our animation, and I approve of this. Now, one thing we've ignored, though, is that diamond. Let's turn on the wireframe just to see how it's rotating when we throw it. Maybe pause and scrub the animation just to see. It doesn't really rotate. If we wanted it to, we could get it to. Trick to that would just be to come to this frame here at 178 and just give it some rotations. I know we kind of did already set this up to do something, but if we take a look at this now and scrub, we should see some different angles kind of appearing, and that might look nice. Maybe give it a few spins even. And then we can think about how it lands here a little bit better. But that should give it some more interesting angles, hopefully. It still looks like it's pretty much falling the same way. Kind of ironic. It does make a full 360 rotation on some axes here, so I guess I'll take it. But it depends on what we want to get out of here. So I'm not too worried about that. Hopefully we didn't make it look wonky at this point. But you can play around with that if you want to get that to do a little bit more than what we have going on here. I think it looks fine as is. All right, cool. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to go through and finish your moving holds. So look for the ones that need intent, look for the ones that just need to have a little bit more life in them, and also be mindful that your character's not accidentally penetrating the ground anywhere or doing anything really weird off screen. I don't really like how we lose that finger there, but I'm not going to fuss over it. It's a very short frame, and it's just going behind that sound mound, so what do you do? I don't think I want to fight to get it to look perfect though. All right. So we're almost done with the animation here. We're going to take a look at another aspect next, but go ahead and get those moving holds in, and I'll see you in the next one.